All right. So, everyone, we're in our final stretch here of the symposium. Thanks, everyone. And we are going to now have our second to last speaker, Mr. Dallas Wynn.
Okay, I'll figure it out. So can everybody hear me all right? Good. No. You might hear me real good one time. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. I'll talk in my inside voice. So appreciate everybody coming out today. And wow, I feel intimidated listening to the questions and listening to the previous speakers. And we heard some smart people this morning, some smart people this afternoon. I am not that person. Okay. I'm comic relief, entertainment, but we're going to talk about animal welfare a little bit as we go. And hopefully you get entertained and maybe you take something away from you. So I work for Tyson Foods. I'm a senior manager of animal welfare. We're very proud at Tyson that we have animal welfare specialists assigned to every one of our complexes in both poultry and also in our fresh meats, but particularly talking about poultry. And so it's very good that they get to work with doing the auditing, and they're all PACO certified internally, and do a lot of teaching and training and really trying to drive the culture. And that's what we're going to talk about a lot today. And the last presentation really set me up to talk about people and communication. And that's something that I'm passionate about. And so you have to hear my sermon on people and communications anytime I speak. Okay. We figure out a way to weave that in. But a lot of people say, okay, well, you already told us, Dallas, you're not really the sharpest tack in the room. And what exactly are your credentials? And that's kind of what I tell everybody. So, that's particularly the young people that work with me. I started back in the covered wagon days, and 34 years in the business. So I think that makes me like legacy plus or something. So the previous speaker was saying 20 something years in the 90s. And I'm like, yeah, I think we can go even further back than that. So anyway, really getting old and feeling it, but certainly wasn't covered wagon days, but it sure feels like it sometimes. You'll notice I like to move around a lot as well. So things we want to talk about today, we want to talk about people and communication. And like I said, we got to set up for that last time, because we talk about how do we execute what we need to happen, right? And that's really what drives animal welfare. Then I want to talk about the 5 domains framework, and you heard a little bit about that from Amelia Woods at PACO, and we'll contrast that a little bit with the 5 freedoms. And then ultimately, how do these things blend together to try to drive an animal welfare culture? Because that's really what we're all about, right? All of us in this room. So I like to say, dealing with people is the key to success in anything that we do. We got to sell our ideals, though, okay? And some of the things that we heard in the last talk, what keeps people up at night? All the different people coming and going, right? New people, right? Coming in. We constantly have to be talking about what's important to us. And there's a couple of different ways to do that, right? And I talk about sticks and carrots, okay? So everybody knows what a stick is, right? I can get you to do what I want you to do if I have enough power, and I beat you with whatever into submission, right? Does it work? Kinda, but not real good. Then we can use carrots. I'm going to bribe you into doing what is right. And I'm thinking perspective of animal welfare, right? Right now, that's what we're talking about today, but it really applies to everything, right? Productionally or, really in anything. And so what we have to do is get some buy-in. And that's when that's when our culture really starts driving itself. And that's when we can try to be visionaries, right? Create that vision of where we would like it to be, and then invite people to go along with us. And when we can do that, it drives itself. Culture starts driving itself, and it can drive itself good or bad, depending on the vision that we set and whether or not people trust us and we do a good job of communicating. Clay, may have to get Clay to come help me here. So I talk about animal welfare, that interaction between people and the birds. We're talking poultry today. That's my background. But it's really that where the rubber meets the road sort of deal. And I think about it when we talk about, like Tyson, for example, that's who I work for. We're looking at harvesting 43 million birds every week. You think about the sheer numbers, right? And each of those birds, and we forget, we forget every one of them is an individual, right? And they didn't just wander in out of the jungle and assemble in these houses. We produced the eggs. We drove the fertility numbers. We hatched them. We put them in those houses. We played a part in that. That makes it extra important that we have a huge ethical and moral responsibility to take care of those words, but also something I heard from Dr. Candace Croney, care about them. And it's really, if you think about it, that's two different things, right? Caring for them is making sure you got feed, you got water, you got all that stuff. Caring about them is like, I wonder what kind of experience they're having, right? Two different things to think about. Is anybody sleepy out there? Because I need somebody to smile or mock me or throw some popcorn or something so I don't get nervous and pass out. I already told Clay he's my CPR guy besides my technical support. So what have we got to do? We said people are important. That's where the rubber meets the road. So there's an old story. I don't know whether it's true. I don't care whether it's true. I like it. It's a fun story. Anybody ever had the opportunity to work with a new poultry grower just coming on board and getting started? Excellent. Yeah, excellent. So I have too a few times back in the covered wagon days, but a wonderful experience most of the time, right? Because they're new, just coming on, they want to do everything right. So how do I do this? How do I do this? I want to make sure everything's perfect. Every I needs to be dotted. Every T needs to be crossed. So the story goes, we've got a new grower just come on board. And the tech's been out there days and days in preparation for the flock that's coming tomorrow. And we've talked about ventilation, and we've talked about temperatures, and we've talked about the feed, and we've talked about everything. And we think we're ready for birds tomorrow. So the tech goes home. About 8 o'clock that night, phone rings. Tech answers it and says, "Look, I apologize for calling you. I know we've talked today, but I'm really worried about it. The birds are coming in the morning. I can't remember. What did you tell me I was supposed to do with my water lines?" Well, the tech's tired. We've talked about it. It's not that big a deal. He's going to be there tomorrow morning. Set them at eye level, right? That's what we do. We set them at eye level. Is anybody figuring out what's going to happen? So the next morning, the tech oversleeps a little bit, like, some of us are prone to do sometimes. But he gets there just as they're starting to unload birds and walks in, and guess what? Where are the water lines? Eye level. Communication, right? We want to do the right thing. It's not always about intentions, right? Well, I didn't intentionally do the wrong thing. I did what you told me. We take for granted. And I like to say, be specific when you communicate. We rely so often in our business on just falling back on common sense. And you see I reference it. What the heck is common sense? Show of hands. Who in this room does not have common sense? Yeah. Oh, well, we all got it. Yeah, I did ask that question one time to a group, and I had a young lady who I'm not sure she was paying attention, but anyway, if so, she really was self-aware, and I appreciate her honesty. But anyway, we all think we have it. And I was thinking about that this morning when it was pouring down rain out there, and I was watching it. Thankful that it was raining, but we could all look out there, use your imagination. Remember, it was raining this morning. We could have a guy standing in the middle of that road with the rain coming down, dancing the middle of the street, naked, and we could go out there to rescue him and pull him out of the street before he got run over and say, "What in the world is wrong with you? Don't you have any common sense?" And he'd be like, "Yes, I got common sense. I'm worried about that person over there, though. I don't think they do." We all think we've got it. And we rely on that way too often. Sometimes, and it's fun, I say it's fun, all the things that we're talking about this morning, all the where's science going to take us? What's the next step? But we can't forget that it comes back to being very specific. Sometimes so specific, the things that's like, well, that's just common sense. Don't kick chickens, don't hit chickens, don't throw chickens. Like, I shouldn't have to say that. But yet we do. And we have to stop and realize that not everybody has the benefit of the upbringing maybe that we did. And so some of these concepts of animal welfare and taking care of animals, we may be introducing ideals of taking care of animals in a way that they've never been exposed to from a people perspective, right? And so we got to keep hammering home. Be specific when you communicate. This is what's important. This is what I want. Keep driving that message home. Okay. So a few communication basics. Be specific. We talked about that. You want people to listen to what you're saying. I fall back on a lot of Dale Carnegie stuff, and some of y'all probably heard this already, and I'm sorry if it bores you, but it bears repeating, because in my gazillion years in the industry, I can't tell you at all different levels, right, how many people don't understand these basics. And if we want people to see that vision that we have for animal welfare and where we want to go, we've got to be good communicators. We've got to influence them. I like the sound of my name. Sweet music to my ears. My name is Dallas. That's my given name. You want me to feel good all over, deep down inside? Use my name. Hey, Dallas, how you doing? Thank you, Dallas. How you doing? It is universal. Figure out how to remember people's names. And if you're bad at it, just admit you're bad at it, okay? I remember you. I'm sorry, I forgot what your name was. Tell me again. It's much better than trying to fake it. But realize that that is a powerful tool, especially, let's say we're talking about folks, that picture we saw before, folks decking those turkeys, loading those turkeys. How about somebody can go to that, visit that farm and be able to recall that person's name and call them by name? Wow. The next thing out of your mouth is, let me tell you about why animal welfare is important to us and what I need you to do. You've got their attention. You've got their buy-in. You've recognized them and acknowledged them. There are a few other things too. And if you'll think about it, this goes on in your head. And I learned this, I don't even remember, but anyway. Anytime somebody starts talking to you, or you start talking to somebody else, your mind automatically goes into, why is this important? What are you telling me? Why is this important? How does it affect me? There's a survival instinct down inside of all of us. And it's like, okay, why is this important? How does it affect me? And then ultimately it's like, okay, what do you want? What do you want me to do? As you start communicating, figure out how to incorporate the answers of those questions when you're talking to people, and you'll go a lot further. Clay. Okay. So if we do a good job of talking, that might make us a good car salesman, but it doesn't necessarily get the culture that we want. Okay. We got to have some trust, right? Because sometimes these folks that we're talking about, they're not really going to comprehend everything. I don't comprehend everything. All the stuff I heard this morning, I don't comprehend all of it. I'll tell you. But if I trust who's telling me, because they built trust with me, then I just accept it. Like, okay, I trust this person. I know this person. Therefore, if they say we need to do X, Y, and Z, animal welfare wise, they believe me. So how do you build trust? Well, first thing, go back to my common sense deal. All right. Common sense would tell you, but I need to tell you, don't lie. Okay. Let's start off by being honest with the words that come out of our mouth. The next thing, do what you say. If you don't do what you say you're going to do, you just lied. Okay. Your actions have lied and they don't match your words. So that's important. And listen, I'm not going to bore you with the story because I'll have to watch. I'll be running over time. And Dr. Weimer, if I start running out of time, do something. Okay. So Dr. Weimer had to put up with me last week and knows that I can get carried away on time, but I digress. But listen, not just to the words that are coming out of people's mouth, but for comprehension. What are you telling me? What is the message? What's important to you? And if you can find what's important to people and what they're really asking you, then you can tailor the message to help them understand what they need to understand. Super powerful. Everybody hates it. Everybody screws up. We all do. We all make mistakes. We don't want to acknowledge it. I don't want to acknowledge it. But wow, pretty darn powerful. If you just say, you're right, I screwed up. Let's talk about what we can do to make it better. Wow, powerful. Because then it's like when if you do that, then when you say, this is how it is, I stake my name on it, which I already said is pretty sweet sound, right? They'll believe you because it's like, yeah, I know Dallas will tell me he screwed up. I can trust him. If I can trust him, then the words coming out of his mouth about what's important in animal welfare, maybe it's important. Anybody have any questions so far? I like to do questions as we go. That way I'm not overwhelmed when we get to the end. Okay. No, Clay. Okay. I want to transition a little bit and let's talk about the 5 domains framework. And Amelia Woods with Paco mentioned that framework this morning, along with the 5 freedoms. And I like to say it's similar to the freedoms, which Amelia said this morning, but it's different. Okay. And Tyson is moving to the 5 domains model, and we'll talk a little bit about why. So just a reminder, and Amelia put it up this morning, and I appreciate that. I think everybody probably knows this, right? ABCs, we all know freedom, 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 freedom. We got it. That model's been around since what, the 70s? So I think, and a whole lot of programs are based on that, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's a good one. Okay. But some of the challenges that go with it is that it focuses really on negative experiences. Okay. It's freedom from something bad. There's no accounting for anything that might be right or anything that might be good. And then some of them, and I throw thirst up there as an example. It's necessary for survival. We can't truly, we can't, a bird can't know that they need to drink unless they feel thirst to start with. But second, even if I put it into a human perspective, you don't truly appreciate how good something tastes unless you're a little bit thirsty to start with, or you're a little bit hungry to start with. And so if you don't experience that a little bit, then you do deny a little bit of that pleasure. And it starts getting complicated and confusing. But you don't have that measurement with the freedoms, right? It's either good or it's bad, which is, another thing. Can things not get, when they're really good, can they not get a little bit better? And when they're really bad, can they not get a little worse? And I think that's something that we struggle with in the five freedoms model that we don't have with the five domains. And I think that's exactly why we're making that switch at Tyson. And in the five freedoms, you don't capture anything in the mental state, right? I throw out there talking about hunger, and I get it, animals and people, we're different, absolutely. But I like to think about it from my perspective as a person. Hey, steak dinner and a bologna sandwich are both going to keep me from being hungry, right? But my mental pleasure may be different depending on those, right? But I'll make it even deeper, right? If you feed me steak every meal for a few weeks, I may start deciding I get more pleasure out of the bologna sandwich. So that's the kind of stuff that we get out of the five domains model that you don't capture when you're just talking. Are they hungry? Or are they not hungry? So we talk about the five domains. As mentioned this morning, is developed by David Miller, and had opportunity to get to listen to him on a call not too long ago as he talked about how they developed it. And it's fascinating. Again, much like the speakers this morning, way above my head, but that's okay. I can pick out little morsels that I can comprehend. But the strengths of it are that, it evolves over time. And the more we learn about welfare, it just adapts and continues to grow. So where we're at, you heard our previous speaker talking about turkey production 20 years ago versus turkey production now. This is a model that lets us say that was the standard then. This is the standard now. Tomorrow we may be over here. And so that's the beauty of it. It refines the understanding of welfare by incorporating a wide range of specific experiences. It takes out that stuff talking about pleasure or suffering, right? It's more about just a measurement of how we're doing. Continuous improvement, I already mentioned that. What's great is it starts capturing the mental aspect. And as I already mentioned, it's the framework that we're adopting at Tyson. So just a little shameless plug there for Tyson, but I thought it's a nice little video that summarizes. And as we walk through them and talk a little bit about them. So for the first domain, obviously, like we saw in the video, nutrition. And it's what we refer to as a survival-related physical domain. And a negative example, obviously, and again, similar to freedoms, but different, right? But restricted water or food, poor food quality, right? We start thinking about not just do we have it, but like my steak and bologna thought, we start talking about the quality of the diet, right? And the positive would be that, okay, I've got enough food and water. Is my diet varied? Is it balanced? Does it give me everything I need? Do I take, is it enjoyable? And so compared to the freedoms right now, like we just talked about, we're considering more than just that hunger aspect, right? We're considering what does that do to us mentally? And we'll get down to that. I say us, our animals. Second domain is the environment. So again, it's a survival related physical domain. When we talk about a negative example, it's an uncomfortable physical environment. Maybe it's unpleasant. Whereas positive is like, okay, I'm comfortable. It feels good. Again, we're considering more than just the safety and protection from the elements. Okay. Well, your birds are not out in the rain, so therefore we check the box on the 5 freedoms. Everything's good. Well, maybe not. Again, varying levels. Can it get better? Yes. Can it get worse? Yes. Always on everything. Third domain is health. Again, a survival related physical domain. A negative would be disease, injury, they're unfit. Some of the turkey photos that we saw, as opposed to being healthy and fit and uninjured. And in my opinion, right, this is the one that's the easiest to measure, right? We can determine disease, we can determine injury. These are things that are pretty easy to measure. And so I think it's the easiest of any of them. Fourth domain is the behavior one, and so it's what we refer to as a situation-related physical domain. A negative would be that we can't, behavior that we want to express, we can't. Okay, it's restricted. Whereas positive would be, I'm able to express that behavior. Right? Is that somebody asked a question earlier? Dust bathing or things like that, things that brings pleasure, right? And I don't know that we like to use the word pleasure, but feels good, right? And we want to do it for some reason. We don't know why, but we want to do that. But again, we're capturing items in this domain that are outside of just basic survival, right? Just using that dust bathing as an example, you don't have to do that to survive, right? But that may be something that impacts the welfare of the bird, right? What kind of life they're having. Is it a good life, right? Or is it just an okay life? Or is it a great life, right? And that's the difference between freedoms and model and the domains model. We start saying there's all different ranges of good and all different ranges of bad. And here's where we really start changing. And that fifth domain is the mental state. And it's an affective experience domain, right? So we heard about that in some of the presentations this morning. But, a negative of that would be their, animals are bored or depressed, they're anxious. Positive is I'm calm, I'm energized, I'm comfortable, right? Who hasn't seen chickens or turkeys or whatever playing and chasing each other? Wow, what a great scene, right? Things are good then, we're comfortable. But notice this domain is the ultimate measurement of the animal's welfare status, and it's dependent on the other 4. All right. So for me, this is where it really gets in your head, and I think this is the huge value of the domains, is because then you start thinking and analyzing. It's like, okay, if you're out in the rain, my environment's pretty bad. Okay. Does my mental state get better if you bring me a hot cup of coffee? My environment still sucks, but maybe my mental state gets a little better. And so as we put that into what we're thinking about with birds, animals, how are all those domains interconnected? And for me, being a simple guy, here's a nice little graphic that talks about how the physical and functional domains, the first 4, feed into the mental domain, which really ultimately drives our welfare status. But again, being a simple guy, well, I already said, really makes you think, and we talked about that. But I like to think about them as gauges. And when I envision it like that, it really starts making sense to me, right? So each one of those is like an infinite. It's not on the gauge, but it can always get better. It can always get worse. And my main goal is to just to max out that mental. Make them just as feeling as good as they possibly can. So like I talked about, maybe my environment's pretty low, but can I do something behavior wise? Can I do something nutrition wise that drives up the reading on my mental? That's the beauty of it. And that's where, that's where we want to go as a culture, where folks are really starting to think about this bird's an individual. What kind of life does it have? Can it get better? What can I do to make it get better? Right? Maybe the environment's not in my control today, but maybe I can make some adjustments to something else. And that bird has a better experience that day. Get closer. I read your mind, Dr. Wyman. So if we're working on our people relationships, right, we're getting good communication, we're building some trust, we've got an animal welfare framework in place, whether it's the 5 domains like we've decided at Tyson, or it's the 5 freedoms, it doesn't matter. But something to guide us, right? This is how we're going to make decisions on what's right for us. How do we continue to build and sustain that culture? And we already talked about it's continuous, right? It's continuous. We got to keep working to maintain the status quo, but then we also want to drive it to the next level. How do we do these things? Pick up the pace. So one thing that we want to do is we want to make sure as a company, as an industry, really, let's make sure we're doing some auditing, right? And those of y'all that have any kind of quality background or whatever, you realize that it's a step in the river. It's how it is right this minute, right here. It may be different tomorrow, right here, but that's just a step in the river. But that tells us, how are we doing? Okay, we've got to know how we're doing. Whether that's internal auditing, which I think is best that we have a continuous program. But also outside, bring in some outside folks, some third-party auditors. Let's make sure that we're looking at really, where do we stand as an organization? And I really challenge the whole industry. Where do we stand as an industry? The other components that we've got to do as we build cultures, we've just got to constantly be training and coaching at all different levels. For those new folks, right? They need to hear that message. Don't throw chickens, okay? The ones that have been around and they have comprehended that, we've got to tailor to them. What's the next step, right? What's the next thing to build on? And that's how you build that culture. And it usually involves a couple of different components. Certainly it does. This is how we manage it at Tyson, but there's always more than one right answer. But generally, you're going to have some general animal welfare training, which is the why, the basic absolutes, the common sense that we should already know, right? And we're going to do that with everybody. And then more job specific, right? If you're decking turkeys, this is what we need you to know from an animal welfare perspective, right? If you're hanging chickens, this is what we need you to know. If you're a grower, this is what we need you to know. Kind of like the last presentation. This is how we need to make decisions on culling, right? And why it's important. So. And then we've got to measure progress. Are we any better today than we were yesterday or last year or 10 years ago? And so it's real easy to be, well, I think we are. I feel like we are. Try to find things that are numerical and trackable and easily measured. And so, some examples of key welfare indicators that we measure at Tyson and we track that let us know how we're doing year over year, whether we're getting better or not, are things like non-injured wings during transport. You saw some of those slides and examples this morning with the PACO presentation, transportation livability, and then some of the the paw damage, non-injured paws. So those are all things that are easily measured. They're numerical, and they let you gauge year over year whether you're getting better, you're getting worse. Not just year over year, really, week over week and month over month and things like that. So most important thing, driving culture. When you see the guy in the middle of the street and you're like, I can't believe it. Just go home, go to bed, get up, come back tomorrow, start all over again. Persistence, because you're never going to get there. And that's why we all have jobs, right? That's why we want to follow the science, but that's exactly why we keep doing research, right? Because we don't think we're doing it the best that we can do right now. We think tomorrow can be better. And so it takes persistence. That, I believe, and I should have put on there easy questions. I already said I'm the simple guy in the room. Okay. So I don't take hard questions, but I will take anything that's easy. Okay. That's it. Easy questions. Anyway, thank you. Well, you at least entertained. Okay. So, okay. Thank you. No, I've heard your questions. They're hard.
I'll make this one easy.
Okay.
I'll just make it a statement
Okay.
about that.
Okay.
I really liked your comments, Dallas, about applied knowledge immediately, about how you focus on the mental
Yes.
aspect part. I know myself, and there's a bunch of other like welfare researchers who are in that sort of group too, where it's like, doesn't even matter to the bird if they have like maybe a nutritional issue or a behavioral limitation somehow, if they feel good. Like if they don't mind that they cannot perform a certain normal behavior, is it then a welfare concern? So even people are starting to argue that that affective state, that mental state may be almost all that matters.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that was-
Yes. But, I have also in my head tried to think about that. It's like, okay, well, again, I'm simple. Okay. But, okay, if an animal, think of it like a child. Well, they eat candy bars 3 days, three meals a day, every day. And we know that's not good for their welfare. So, but they're happy
Yeah.
until they're sick. So the same thing. So I start thinking about animals. It's like, okay, just because I know we don't use the word happy, just because they're super positive, does that necessarily, if I only feed them mealworms, they may be really, really happy, but maybe nutritionally, I'm not giving them everything they need. I don't know. I mean, and that's where the 5 domains is, in my mind, so much better because it gets in your head. And that's exactly where we want to be, where that people are really starting to think, now, I don't have the answers. I got more questions than I got answers, but I'm really thinking about this animal right here and how they're doing. So thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for using my name. Felt all warm all over.
Can you comment on some of the metrics that you might review company-wide on animal well-being?
Yes, sir. Certainly, perfectly feel comfortable talking about the ones that we put on our sustainability report anyway. So we're really looking specifically at some of what I mentioned, but non-broken wings during transport. So internally, we're monitoring those by every facility that we have so that we can see where we've got opportunities and work on those. And then as a company, right, year over year, we want to see the number of birds affected percentage wise going down. And so that's something that we monitor. Again, we monitor paw health, right? And tracking non-injured and again, looking by complex, by plant, even we're trying to get to the point where we look actual more specific flocks. And so that's our evolution that we're on, right? We just become more and more granular. But again, looking for month over month improvement, identifying, we know if we talk about paws, right? We know that we struggle probably more in wintertime because our houses are closed up and they get damper. So Does the data prove that out, or is that just a paradigm that we have? So that's the things that we're looking at. Who's managing that better than others? And those are some things that the numbers can tell us and help us get better. So those are some of the DOA numbers on arrival, right, to measure our transportation. I think also that tells us a little bit about what kind of job we're doing with our culling process during the grow process. So those are some of the things that, again, numerical, easily managed, and let us focus on opportunities, and then see, are we getting better or not year over year? If we're not, we need to figure out why. So, but yeah, thank you for that question.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on those key performance indicators, that's, I appreciate what you put in that sustainability report. And from a scientific and industry perspective, we know those are great measures. Is there something more that the consumer might be looking for, and how can we potentially change those metrics into something they can easily understand?
Yeah. So I don't know, to be honest, but you are exactly right. And if I could answer that question, I'd probably be, president of the company. And as you all know, first of all, we got a business to run and we're feeding the world, right? And we should be proud of that. But consumers are also very fickle, right? Okay, I want cage-free eggs, even though I don't know what that means. But by the way, I want them to be 50 cents a dozen. Because I'm not going to pay for it. And it doesn't matter because I don't even know what it is. But again, I digress and get off in the ditch. But I don't know, to answer your question, just the short answer. I think that our entire industry has opportunity in simplifying the message of what's important, why it's important. Transparency, I think industry-wide, I think we have opportunities with being more transparent, right? And we talk about, well, people don't know where food comes from. Well, I agree. I started out as a young person that didn't know where food came from, okay? We've got to do a better job. I don't know what that looks like exactly. And I'm sure you don't either, because you have it, but we keep looking. We are looking at some other measurable metrics within Tyson. I don't want to share that right now, but we do some that we don't share on our sustainability report, again, to tell us whether we're getting better or worse. And we are doing a lot of research internally. We have a research farm. I'm blessed to work for Dr. Karen Christensen. And well, if you ever met her, there is a true passion for animals and people as well. So, other questions? Thank you all for giving me easy questions, mostly easy questions.